Great. Well, thank you, Scott. So Scott and I and Gwendolyn Bai have been working on the fundraising campaign for the Preservation of Marian Friends meeting. So I wanted to welcome you to our sixth in our series of Know Thy Neighbors, where we invite speakers in. This initially started with the attempt to put a little more of a public face on Marian Friends meeting for our immediate neighbors, but we started thinking about it and we decided to expand it. So I wanted to thank Laura Jackson for working with us. So we, as I said, we initially started with history and historic preservation topics, but we decided to expand it to include social and environmental justice themes. And Laura has been very helpful in connecting us with speakers like Jonathan today. So thank you, Laura. So as I said, this started as a way of publicizing our historic preservation campaign. Marian Friends Meeting is a National Historic Landmark. It was built in 1695. So we are carrying out the stewardship of this building and this site that Friends started all those many years ago. So it's quite an honor to preserve this building and to preserve the spiritual community of Marian Friends Meeting. So it's an honor to be working along these lines. We have raised $70,000 towards our $90,000 goal. So we are doing really great. We have a little bit of a hurdle to reach our final destination here of $90,000. And let me just say, this is the first phase of our preservation campaign. And so this is the planning phase, but where can you go without a good plan? So thank you so much for joining us today. Marian is a dynamic meeting, and with all of these years under our belt, we feel like we have a great future in front of us, and we look forward to carrying that on. So I'm very proud to introduce Jonathan Snipes as our speaker today. Jonathan was raised as a Quaker in Fallsington Meeting and in Bucks County, and he attended both public and Quaker schools, and he graduated from the George School and Haverford College. He holds a master's degree in education from Temple, and Jonathan interned at the Quaker United Nations office in New York City. He later spent 2 years working at the Friends Peace Center in San Jose, Costa Rica, and after a career consulting in organizational development and conflict resolution, he returned to his family's farm and founded the Snipes Family Farm and Education Center in 2008, along with his wife, Melanie Dowdy, and his sister, Susan Snipes Wells. Jonathan and Melanie live and work on the farm, along with an extended family and an extensive network of dedicated employees and volunteers. And he loves mountains, oceans, and of course, barns. And he especially loves to sing. He said he wasn't sure if he was going to sing for us today, but well, maybe he'll throw that in too. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, Jonathan, and take it away.
Thanks so much for that introduction. And I want to thank both Scott and Ross for doing all the technology and getting this set up, and also to my friend Laura Jackson for making the connection. Laura and I first met in 1974 when I showed up at George School as a very immature high school freshman. And Laura has been a close friend and mentor for many, many, many years. And she's actually part of the story I'm going to tell today. I also really enjoyed seeing the pictures of Marian Meeting, your beautiful campus, and just such a wonderful building, and your long history, and hoping so much that your preservation effort helps you to be a relevant and powerful force in your local community. So that's really inspiring to see what you all are doing. I did notice when the pictures were up, there was an old postcard, and across the top it said, Marian Friends Meeting, oldest place of worship in Pennsylvania. And that kind of jumped out at me, because I thought, well, as inspiring as the meeting house is, this land has been worshiped on for thousands of years. And, every wooded glade and every stream side, every, mountain slope is just a place that people have worshiped. And I wanted to acknowledge, as people are acknowledging is so crucial to do today, the native people that lived on this land and continue to live here and continue to inspire us with their deep spiritual connection to the land. So I wanted to bring the name of the Lenape people into the room and acknowledge the deep and long abiding relationship between Quakers and Native people, and the work that we obviously still need to do together to acknowledge the past and to move forward in a good way. And since the title of this sharing was transformation, that's part of it. We need to, well, let me just back up and say that as I was meditating on what I could share with you all today in Meeting for Worship this morning, transformation really jumped out at me. And if we, as friends, maybe move to the next slide. So let's just stay here for a minute. So this is the mission of our presently at Snipes Farm: to model and teach sustainable agriculture, to build community, and to reconnect people to the land. And I think inherent in this is that word transformation. And for friends, as I was meditating this morning, maybe one of the transformations we're most familiar with is the process of convincement, of joining a worshiping community of friends and finding that that is the place that we want to be and that our lives are changed. And sometimes that happens in a flash. You know, it's the right thing, the right place to go, the right thing to do. And sometimes it's a long, long, long process of change, of transformation and convincement. So that's a little bit of the story that I want to tell today. Some things that happen fast and some things that happen very slowly to move what we have done at Snipes Farm to where we were and where we are today, and that mission that was just on the screen. So let's stay on this picture for a minute, because this shows the reality of change and some continuation from the past. So this is where we're located, Snipes Farm in Lower Bucks County. And on the left, you see Route 1 flying zoom. Well, it goes on the entire East Coast, right, of our country, but this is moving between New York City and Philadelphia, and all of the neighborhoods that surround us, the neighborhoods, apartment complexes, shopping malls, and everything you see in the picture on the left from the highway over to the neighborhoods of the right is part of Snipes Farm. Up to the woodlands you see on the left, and you can see a little line from that cloverleaf, and that is another road that runs between, that cuts off a little bit of the farm. But this is 150 acres in an area where we are pretty much the only working farm in our township in this area of Bucks County. You might be familiar with farther up into Bucks County, the rolling farmland that's up there. And the county's doing a very good job of preserving farmland, and we are one of those preserved farms. But this picture shows the reality of where we are. In some ways, in a lot of ways, we are an oasis, and we want to be that for the community. And with Route 1 right at our doorstep, we are easily accessible by thousands, if not millions of people, something like 34 million people within a day's drive of Snipes Farm. So we recognize the oasis we have in a changing community. The next slides just show a little bit of the land. Again, loving the land in all seasons, winter and spring, so beautiful that we're in now, summertime, and the beautiful fall. So Snipes family, coming from the Moon family, has been on the same land for about 200 years. And this shows our main barn on the farm, which replaces one that burned around 1900. And the next slide shows the barn today, still in use. And then the next slide. So I just want to hang here for a minute. This is on the right, my great-grandmother, Rachel Anna Price Moon. And on the left is my grandmother, Jane Chase Moon, later to become Jane Moon Snipes. And if you just, yeah, stay there for a minute. Stay back on the, yeah, that one right there. Because my great grandmother is dressed in the plain clothes. So speaking of transformation and change, she is the last generation of my family to wear the plain clothes. And if you think about her dressed like that, this is about 1894. So she's wearing some clothing from a generation, if not two generations earlier, if you were another person in society looking at her. My grandmother, little Jane, would grow up to be a woman who would not wear the plain clothes. And my dad remembers as a young boy, my dad was born in 1919. He remembers another change point among friends when his father left the men's meeting, got up, and my father watched my grandfather do this, got up and walked over and sat with the women's meeting. So this would have been sometime in the early to mid 20s. So for me, that symbolizes, what do you hold on to and carry into the future, and what do you let go of? If we're going to talk about transformation, what's the bedrock that we hold to, and what are the things that we can let go of? We don't need them anymore, or they actually stand in the way of the things we need to do. And I want to honor my grandmother and my great grandmother. So here's my dad with his siblings, and they are actually maybe not in this picture, but they did go to Fallsington Friends School by pony cart, and my dad was the driver. So at 8 or 9 years old, because that Route 1 you saw was a quiet country road in the mid 20s or later 20s, my dad was able to drive his siblings to school in the pony cart. That's my dad on the left driving, of course, and then his younger brother Tom, his sister Ann, and my uncle Brad on the far right. So my dad just died a few years ago at age almost 100. And he was, as a young boy, he went into the barn and saw something under a cover, pulled the cover off, and underneath was the carriage that his parents had driven and their parents had driven before they bought their first car. And he was inspired by that, and he loved horses and carriage driving for the rest of his life, reminding him of his connection to the past and connection to all those folks that had come before him. So what could symbolize more the change we need to do than looking at this picture of solar power? Well, solar power is not new. Solar power has been working on this planet for millions of years, but our ability to harness it in this way is a new and inspiring thing. So around 2000, our family business was, just to be honest, was on the rocks. We had been a nursery and garden center going back to my great grandfathers and many generations before that as nursery men and women. My grandmother continued to sell trees when she was in her 20s and 30s. But by the time 2000 rolled around, that business was gone under the influence of Home Depot and Lowe's and the mass production of nursery stock. And we could no longer sort of hold our own against that. And what had been a nursery business for many generations really needed to come to a close. But the land was still here. So our question to ourselves, to my sister Susan and I, was, how do we use this land? Again, what are we carrying from the past into the future? And what are we letting go of? And it was gut-wrenching. We had to close a business that had been established for 50 or 60 years by my uncle and aunt, Snipes Farm and Nursery. And we had to lay off many employees. We had to pay off debt. And we had to think about this incredible resource that we have been given, this 150 acres, this really blessed oasis, so accessible to the local community, but needing to hold its own financially. So I happened to be riding the train one day, and I picked up the newspaper, and in the newspaper, it told a story about a woman named Laura Jackson. And this is not, Laura's not in the picture, but hold this picture because this is a great picture. And Laura was training to be a farmer. And I thought, wait a minute, is this Laura Jackson, who was my English teacher at George School? And I read the article, I figured it had to be her. So I contacted Laura. She said she was, yes, she was in a farm training school program. So I went to visit her in Massachusetts. And my sister and my wife and I began to talk at the farm. And we set 3 goals for ourselves. We needed to, in this process of transformation, we needed to preserve the land so the pressure to sell was not so intense. We wanted to keep the land open to the public and have it not be a private compound. And we wanted to focus on farming because we just felt that that tradition, that reality, and local food was going to become crucial in an area where farms were disappearing. I do want to say, back up and say one thing here, that there are certain inflection points in this process of transformation when an opportunity presents itself. And I think we know this from our worship, that there are times when something comes flooding through, or we are presented with a reality that we have to react to, as we as friends call it, a concern. So several times along the way of the history of Snipes Farm, there has been the opportunity to sell the land, or there has been the threat that the land would be taken. So that little girl in the picture, Jane Moon, my father says, who would have thought that as an only child, single woman in the early 1910s, that she would have been able to hold on to her family farm when all the farms around her were disappearing. Either people were selling or land was being lost. And by the time the Depression rolled around, her cousins lost their farms and she was able to hold on to it. I think it was through her strength and her rootedness here that several times she said, no, I don't think so. I think there's another purpose. And at one point she turned to her children and she said, well, maybe now is the time to sell if you children don't want to continue to farm. And they wrestled with that and finally decided that they would keep it. When I was growing up, there were letters that would come from real estate developers that would infuriate my uncle when he was farming. And the letters would say, we notice you have 100 acres of vacant land and for which developers will pay handsomely and blah, blah, blah. And my uncle wrote some blistering responses. You know, how can you call this beautiful land where people live, people earn their income, people who work here are able to support their families, the land supports a rich ecosystem. How can you just call this a vacant space that sort of is not being used to its potential? So each time the family said no to that, until finally, recently in the past 20 years, we put the land into permanent preservation through the Bucks County Farmland Preservation Program, through the sale of conservation easements. So that has kind of anchored us and allowed us the security of knowing that the pressure to sell is now gone. So I think of that as a point of almost an inflection point or a point of possibility. We could go one way or the other way. And how do we as friends or people discern what's the right action to take? I have found that, as we know as friends, that the importance of community and helping to make that decision. So we have pulled in volunteers, a nonprofit board, community partners to help us constantly rethink about the value of what we're doing and to maybe change our perspective. We just have our own little bubble, our own way of thinking things. But when we sit in meeting for worship and we stay open to what the friends around us are saying and what the Spirit is saying, that's just crucial. In any of our individual transformation processes, staying open has been crucial, staying open to new ideas. So speaking of new ideas, here's Victoria Lotzball, 20-year employee at Snipes Farm, and she is driving a tractor that has been converted to electric. So that's one of the ideas. You saw the solar panels. So one of the crucial ideas for us in our transformation towards sustainability has been renewable energy. So we can keep going with the slides. Regenerative, we are certified organic. And the next level of transformation for us is to begin to think about sequestering of carbon, the use of animals on the land, the way that we farm. We are now thinking of moving to low-till or no-till. You may have heard of that, a process where you try to tear the land apart as little as possible. So those beautiful farm fields you can think of, evenly plowed, where it's just brown soil and all the plants are gone, that is a terrible, terrible thing for the land. So cover cropping is important, but also moving to ways of agriculture that tear the land up less, that build the organic matter in the soil, that hold the water in the soil. And farmers like Victoria in the center in this picture, the same one who was on the tractor, Victoria in the middle, she brings us a lifetime of agricultural experience. And then the young farmers that have come to the farm have reminded us that change is necessary and that new ways of farming are crucial if we're going to sequester the carbon that we need to do, protect the land, protect the water, hold the water in the soil, and farm in new ways and better ways. Soil regeneration means using what comes from the animals, means using our manure and our compost. This is the love of plants, the love of plants. Using the contour of the land. And I would say in a couple years, maybe 5 years, these pictures will look very different because our style of farming is changing to move from those evenly plowed, cleanly plowed fields to fields where crops are planted right into the cover crop. So the soil is never exposed. And from that comes the best production. And these beautiful slides of the food that is produced. This is the work of many, many, many hands. This was a year when there was truly a bumper crop of watermelons. It was truly unbelievable. But this work of both our farming employees and our many, many, many volunteers. So our CSA, getting down to our programs, our CSA is reaching many families. And we have a farmer's market that was established. Speaking of change and transformation, the way opened for us to found a farmer's market right on Snipes Farm because of COVID. Other farmers markets had closed. So we opened our own farmer's market and now folks are coming on Saturdays. We would never have expected that to happen, but we needed to do that with transformation. Another key part of what we do are our educational programs with children. So we're in local public schools mostly, and schools are also coming and groups are coming to the farm. And what am I eating? Where did it come from? Does it help my body or not? Are the questions that my wife Melanie asks over and over in the classroom. And she finds that when kids can grow their own food here at summer camp or their camp or school gardens at their schools, they will eat that broccoli that the little boy is holding. The other day she was in a school and they were serving rainbow cabbage slaw. And the ladies in the cafeteria were stunned that the children were descending on this cabbage like locusts and just taking it in. And it is, I find that we have found here working with children that when they grow the food, when they cook it themselves, they really want to try it. They really want to eat it. And I think it's a spiritual connection. I remember one little boy in the children's garden lifting a leaf and finding this squash under the leaf, giant squash. And he carried that around like a baby. through the rest of the camp day. It was just such a miracle to him. And I think when children can see the miracle of what they can grow themselves and that it nourishes their bodies, they want to try it. And this is our natural habitat. The land, the woods, the fields, the food, this is our natural habitat. We come up out of this soil. We're made up of carbon, right? So we are connected spiritually to these things, these leaves that these kids in the picture are about to eat. Melanie calls this a salad party. So they go out to the school garden, they will pick and then take it into the classroom and make it, and she'll teach them how to make a yummy salad dressing, and they have a salad party. And they, as I was just saying, they wolf it down. Another program we've done in the schools is hatching chicks. Again, for kids to see the absolute miracle of this little critter coming out of an egg that they probably have only seen in a box coming from the store. And for them to see the miracle of life, it's, wow, there is nothing more inspiring than that. After a while, the chicks come over to the farm, and then we have more egg layers. It's just a wonderful and beautiful thing. So the education programs are core to what we do here at the farm. Summer camp is one of our biggest programs that we run at Snipes Farm, and we understood really early on, if we were to be that open community resource, we needed to find ways to bring people to the farm and make this available for children at all levels. So I think some of the next slides will show, will show camp and the farm as a campus. So that's Melanie on the left. And these are kids. The next slide shows kids mulching trees. So learning about the soil and regenerating the soil. This little guy on the left has now worked. That's Sam Kosha, George School student, now in college. And he has worked on the farm for a couple of summers. So also to inspire young people to want to work with the soil, to be interested in worms and bugs, and to, you know, to lie down and want to look at worms and learn how they live and their importance for soil, is just opens the mind, opens the soul. A garden is like a church. And that's communion. Learning about the natural systems of insects. That's my sister Susan, and she's showing a visiting group how to control pests in an orchard without using sprays. Our orchard is not certified organic, but it's a very low spray orchard. Our vegetables are certified organic. Pennsylvania is a warm and wet place to grow apples organically, so we'll actually be moving out of apple production. These trees were planted when I was in college 30, 40 years ago. So they're reaching the end of their lifespan. So we'll be moving into production of different kinds of perennial crops that don't require the kind of insecticides or treatments that most of the way that so many crops are grown in our country and around the world. No words are needed for that. So the wild places on the farm, as we kind of move toward the end of what I want to share, we are taking a course now, speaking of transformation, the next generation of my family, my nieces and their spouses have moved to the farm and are pushing us in the direction of a practice called permaculture, which some of you may have heard, which is a way of staying open, I guess I would say again, a very deep observation of waiting on the land, observing the land, and really watching how does the water flow? Where does the sun hit in winter and summer? How does wildlife move across the land? What are the wildlife corridors? Water is at the root of a lot of it. And to be able to study that for children and adults to sit and observe and really take in what they are observing about how the land, the trees, the animals want to live, because they know the systems are in place. We have to understand those systems. So as we move from those perfectly plowed farm fields to food forests or perennial crops, and we're building swales and berms and rain gardens to hold water and sink it, it's science, and students are studying, and the root of that is observation. To wait in stillness and to observe how these systems are already functioning around us and how we fit into them. Our connection to the community. The majority of the food that we grow, 70–75% here at Snipes Farm, we are partnering with outside organizations. So these are actually in the picture of Girl Scouts collecting donated apples from the farm, but we're also working through grants and through sales of produce to partner organizations that are feeding people in need. So we are doing that in Trenton, New Jersey, Mercer County, in Philadelphia, in Bucks County. That's the vast majority of what we grow. So I guess I could add that part of our financial model as a nonprofit organization is to partner very intimately with the surrounding community, because we could no way do this on our own. So volunteers are crucial to that. I think these are students from Princeton Friends School. The last picture was Girl Scouts. And yesterday was Earth Day at Snipes Farm. And wow, it was the biggest Earth Day we ever had. We probably had between 75 and 100 volunteers helping us. These are students from Princeton University helping to pick apples. And yesterday we planted trees, we mulched trees, we planted kale, we cleared nature trail and added 2 areas of our nature trail so the public can come and enjoy the property. And it's such an uplifting thing to have a broad community of people supporting the work that we're doing because we are not in it alone. So some of the ways that folks can connect is to contribute to the food we grow. Here for folks in need, to sponsor a camper. We have a commitment to send as many kids to summer camp as possible, no matter what their financial background. So we raise between $50,000 and $60,000 a year to sponsor. We have a commitment to the homeless shelter to send every child in the homeless shelter to the camp for the entire summer, if we can raise the funds to do that. And so we are so blessed by the groups that work with us, the people that support us, our board members, the volunteers that come randomly during the week. Some folks come every, a Wednesday every week to work with us, and the incredible employees we have who are really part of this movement to create local food systems. And I will add one last thing about our connection to the wider community is we also are very tied in to the support of local elected officials at our township level, the county level, the state level, and actually have received some federal grants as well. And there is a movement in this country now, and we have, speaking of transformation, a window of opportunity to push the kind of change in our agricultural system that's needed, to focus on local producers, local distribution networks, and producing it in a way that employs local people, cleans water, protects the land, and builds a solid, integrated, loving local community. And what is more symbolic of that? What's more symbolic of that than sitting and eating food together? It's truly a communion. So that's what I have to share with you, friends. I hope I didn't go on too long.
That was wonderful, Jonathan. Thank you. So maybe what we'll do, and I'm just looking at the chat room here, if anybody has questions for Jonathan, I think in this instance, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question, and then mute yourself again so Jonathan is able to respond. So we'll open the floor now. Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Laura.
Hey, Jonathan, thank you so much. It's good to see how everything's thriving there. I know that, I don't think you mentioned, and I know it's seems to fit with this family history of transformation based on a foundation that remains the foundation that is kept. And I remember that your family has had a mission, the three aspects in its original mission. If I remember, to keep the farm green, or there were 3 of those. Could you share those with us? Because I think, yeah.
Absolutely. There are two things of 3 that I want to share. One is to have farming be the basis of the gift that we can share. So agriculture at the heart of it, to keep the farm open and green in perpetuity, and to not have it be a closed compound, to have it be a community farm. And I'm also remembering that the resources we've drawn on are the resource of the Holy Spirit, just all of creation, that, and to be able to tap into that, the power of that, and then also our evolving science is just so crucial. My eyes have been opened through this course we took as a family with employees in permaculture. It was really just such a mind-broadening experience. And then I shared with you the power of the local community of working together. So those 3 things.
Thank you.
Jonathan, there's a question in the chat. What are the major challenges that a nonprofit family-owned farm faces now?
The pressure on small farms is really tremendous. If you know your history, which I'm sure a lot of you do, there have been these waves of failures of family farms. You can walk into any grocery store and there are all these idyllic, I would call them fantasy photographs on the wall of cows in a field, and there's a happy farming couple. And the reality is that so much of our food is produced in factory farms and on land that has been conglomerated because of the collapse of family farms. So to find a niche and a financial business plan, a financial system that works for a small farm is crucial. And that's, in our experience, is not going to happen by just growing a lot of tomatoes and trying to sell them. We have to have support of the surrounding community. So for us, the biggest programs we have are summer camp. That's a huge fee for service. People pay, and they pay for what they know is a wonderful service. The other is the fundraising we do, and that's why creating a nonprofit has been so crucial for us. And the third are these community partnerships that we've developed with other nonprofit organizations that at this time particularly are looking to get good food to people in need. All of the like Meals on Wheels, for instance, in Mercer County, New Jersey, just approached us for a very large grant to send food, not just the prepared cooked food, but their clients have asked for fresh produce, small amounts of it that they can prepare at home easily. So we're now working with Meals on Wheels. We distribute the food, we get the food to them, they distribute it and send it out with the cooked meals that are going as well. So these kinds of community partnerships are the most crucial thing for us. So a firm business plan and financial footing, I would say is one of the biggest challenges. And the other is staying open to the change, staying open to what's happening around us, both the pressures and also the opportunities. So I think there are many, many opportunities as our culture shifts and people look for local connection, local food, and the environmental consciousness rises.
So a few more questions in chat. And I want to be mindful of the time. We'll probably do another, 10, 12 minutes or so of Q&A. And this was actually a question I had as well, is could you say a little bit more about the animals that you have on the farm? So the chickens, are they just used for eggs? And is the cattle, is it dairy cattle, beef cattle? How are the animals used on the farm?
Right. So that's a really challenging question, because some of the animals you saw in the picture we don't have anymore, the cattle and the sheep and the pigs. And this goes back to the question just a moment ago in terms of financial challenges, is that we know that they're good for the land. We know that the manure is important for the soil. The grazing is crucial for the plants and the ecosystem. And also for us, the animal production was not financially viable. So we laid that down, except for the egg laying and some meat bird production of chickens. So right now we're moving those chickens with a mobile chicken coop around the fields to fertilize the soil, to eat the bugs, and to contribute in that way to the soil fertility. But now with the next generation in the family, they really wanted to take a look at the animals again and to see how they can be integrated back into our production cycle in a way that will work financially. And there are many farms that are doing it. I'll just put in a plug for going onto YouTube, going onto the internet and looking up permaculture or look up regenerative farming. And there are really fascinating examples of how this is being done. A great film to watch also is The Biggest Little Farm. The Biggest Little Farm is a great film to look at how a couple took a piece of really degraded barren land and really enlivened the soil, and they use animals very, very intensely. So for us, that's a challenge for us. We're still looking at it, but for now, the chickens are crucial. Chickens are making wonderful eggs, and they are enlivening our soil, and we're going to be looking back at larger animals again.
So this sounds like a question from somebody who already has a green thumb, so this is good. Any tips for people trying no-till vegetable gardens at home and how to control nocturnal slugs without harming without harming diurnal pollinators?
Okay, I don't have a technical answer for your slugs, no. But I will say that one of your best resources is Rodale Institute, and also to look at permaculture resources online. Rodale Institute here in PA it's like the gold standard, and they've been at it for decades of research into organic and regenerative practices. And they have a commitment to consult to any farm in Pennsylvania free of charge. Now, if you've got a farmer in your backyard, I'm not sure about that, but in terms of their consulting, but their resources are all over the internet. And let's see, there's another, yes, okay. For that, for pest control, Google Singing Frogs Farm, and they have a system, small scale farming, where they use no herbicide, pesticide, and they alternate their crops, and they do no-till farming on a small scale, a couple of acres, but high production. And they do that no-till, and they have a good system of controlling pests. So I'd recommend Singing Frogs Farm videos.
Wonderful. So I think we have one last question here, and I think this is a fascinating question, and I think it sort of helps us to sort of get a sense of maybe, Jonathan, where you got started, but also kind of reflecting on what were some of the challenges. So the question is, I just acquired 80 acres of my family farm that has been in the family since the 1790s. And I'm struggling to keep it. It's such a beautiful vision. So, I guess from time to time, we do acquire certain pieces of property or land. And if somebody wanted to have a vision like yours, what would be your advice?
Wow, that's a big question. What a gift that this friend is describing. What an amazing resource, and also a challenge. And I would be happy to talk more in depth with this friend. There are many, many, many resources. If you are thinking about starting an agricultural production, then you really will need a business plan and a lot of support. If you are thinking, if that financial pressure isn't there, and it's more a question of protection or the ecological resource of the land, then that's a different question. So I'd be happy to talk with that person, but offline. But wow, what a wonderful challenge. It's again, stay open to what the possibilities are, look at all the resources available, and who around you can help you to think about it really deeply. Any one of us or any one family doesn't have all the answers, and we have to assume that there are so many resources, but especially at this time, the opportunity for that, especially depending on where you're located, there is such an interest in this kind of new farming, and also in local agriculture and in land preservation. And there are many, many resources, not just for nonprofits, but many grants and resources also available through counties, through states, through the USDA, that we might not think about. And some folks think, oh, I don't want to get involved in a government grant, it's too much red tape or something. It's not necessarily true. That's not been our experience. So I would say look for as many resources as you possibly can and come up with a good plan. And I'd be happy to talk with whoever that is.
I'll make sure you get connected with
Yep.
that individual.
Yeah.
And then there's also the option of the land preservation that you've followed, Jonathan, right?
Absolutely. Many, many organizations are looking to support people in preserving their family land. If also, I just throw one last idea in, if there is financial pressure, there's also the opportunity to preserve most of your land. And if you need to sell some portion of it to a private landowner or developer or whatever, but preserve most of it, there are many options. So I would hate for someone to think too constricted, but I'd happy to talk with them.
Yeah. And what a wonderful opportunity to have.
Yes.
I do have a quick question. My family has a family farm in Bucks County also, and it's always a struggle, and it's terrible, mounting debt all the time. Are these grants that you're talking about accessible for people who are not nonprofits?
Yes. There
Okay.
are grants for private businesses as well.
If they're preserving their land, they're trying to keep those developers away, that whole
Yes.
problem.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned the USDA. That's one of those kinds of granting organizations?
Well, yes, that's a very high level. That's the
Oh.
U.S. Department of Agriculture, and
No.
I'd probably start
Okay.
with your county
Uh-huh.
or Rodale Institute has a list of grant resources.
Okay, I will go to them, absolutely.
And if
But
you want
start
to
with the
contact
count.
me, I'd be happy to talk with you as well.
That'd be wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. I'm not an expert, but I've learned
Yeah.
a lot of things along the way.
Thank you.
Yep.
I will.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much. What a wonderful talk. We really appreciate you spending the afternoon with us today. I can't thank you enough. And I do want to put in a final word from your sponsor, Marion Friends Meeting. We have our meeting house, as I had mentioned, is a National Historic Landmark. That means that it's more than just a meaningful building for us, for Lower Merion, for the region. It has national significance. There are only 26, roughly 2,600 National Historic Landmarks across the entire country. So just to give you a sense of the seriousness and the gravity that the entire country holds for our building and what it means as part of the, what started with William Penn and with the holy experiment that he introduced into this country that we are now all benefiting from and still fighting to preserve. So, our efforts to preserve our meeting house have big significance. I mean, more than just us, but it's also our home. We have an 1804 caretaker's house on the property. We have two 1820s horse sheds on the property. We have our burial ground, which goes back to 1682. And the meeting house, which construction began in 1695, and it wasn't completed until 1715 because the local friends, the Welsh farmers, were building it on the weekends. When they were in between their farming, Jonathan, they were building this meeting house. So it took all of those years to get it completed. So it's quite an honor to work and preserve this meeting house and to strengthen the spiritual core of our meeting, and to use the preservation of the meeting house as a sort of outward manifestation of what we are trying to do by building our spirituality of our meeting and to strengthen our spiritual home in our community and throughout the region. So I hope you go to our website, which is marionfriends.org, and take a look at our website, see our upcoming programs. We haven't chosen our next one, but it will be in June. I'll be talking to you, Janet, about our next speaker. Stay tuned for that next speaker. And please, I hope you'll consider supporting our preservation fund. And thank you again, Jonathan. Everyone have a great day. Enjoy what's left of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you, Laura.